All right. Hello and welcome from the Crested Butte Museum in Crested Butte, Colorado. To our live audience and to those watching from Zoom, this is our third episode of Voices of Crested Butte, past and present. We're excited to introduce you to this new concept where we are turning the tables on those who have had made a profession of capturing prize stories over the decades in the Gunnison Valley. We're recording them for generations to come. These recordings will be featured on our YouTube channel, Crested Butte Mountain Heritage Museum, for all to enjoy. It's because of you, our supportive members, our donors, that we can make these programs possible and other educational programming. If you haven't renewed your annual memberships, or would you like to become a member or make a donation, visit our webpage, crestedbuttemuseum.com, or visit us here in the museum. Please leave a message or a question in the chat box, which is located on your lower screen. And to the live audience, please raise your hand at the end of the interview. We'll share them and have them answered by Dwayne and Sandy. Now on with today's show, Voices of Crested Butte, past and present, presented by the Crested Butte Museum, Dwayne Vandenbush and Sandy Fales.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm very happy tonight to welcome Sandy Fales, one of the great creative people of Crested Butte, to Voices of Crested Butte. And if you look over some of you folks on Zoom and the people that we have here right above us, you can see two of the great books that Sandy wrote. One is called Crested Butte, The End of the Road, and the other one, that was with M.J. Vosberg.
Yeah.
And then the other one is right up here, The Edge of Paradise. She also is the editor of the Crested Butte Magazine and has done tremendous work the last 33 years. So Sandy, my first question is, how did a self-acclaimed hippie girl out of Austin, Texas, arrive in Crested Butte in 1981? What were you thinking? And tell us how you got here.
All right. I'm going to start a little earlier because my extended family roots were in my granddad's peanut farm in north central Texas, but I grew up in suburbia. In fact, a series of suburbias that were just tidy and safe, but they began to feel boring and a little conformist to me. So I moved to Austin and I started working for Wheatsville Food Co-op, and I met Michael, my husband of these many decades now. And, I was 25 years old in 1981 and newly in love. Michael he had spent some time in Crested Butte hiking and skiing. I'd been skiing once, and he was like, what? Let's just move to this little mountain town, give it a try. I was 25. I was not a brave woman, but I was a very curious woman. So I was like, what the heck? So we moved up here. Michael had a Volkswagen van. I didn't have anything. And it was autumn. The leaves had fallen. The streets weren't paved. It was muddy as heck. It was rainy. It was cold. It was dreadful. People talk about falling in love. I did not fall in love with this town, but I was in love with this man. So I was like, okay, I can do it. So I got a job working for peanuts for the pilot and waiting tables for the Rocking Horse restaurant. And through this sort of synchronicity, we were holding hands, walking down the 200 block of Sopris, and things fell in place. We assumed a loan on a 100-year-old little miner's house in the 200 block of Sopris. Who assumes loans? I'm sure there's not that, we wouldn't have qualified for a loan. We ended up owning this little house. It was 800 square feet. It was very drafty. There were only heat was a wood stove, and the snow piled up on top, and as it piled up, the house got more and more crooked until the front door wouldn't close. And then Michael would get up there and shovel the snow off, and it would kind of slowly get back where the door would close. So it was a radical change. But again, there was romance about it, and it made everything cool. So
Now, in 81, when you got here, Bob Dylan had an expression, the times they are a changing. So from 1981 to 1989, you were in the 80s before you wrote that first book. And then from 89 to 2005, when you wrote the second book. Tell me a little bit about the major changes that occurred in Crested Butte during that period of time.
well, we kind of were here on a bit of a brink. The streets weren't paved, but they were paved not too long after that. On Sopris, the old timers made up about a third of our neighbors. Botsy lived on the corner, Tony Mihalich, Annie Perko, Betty Spahar, Dorothy Sporsich. They were part of the community. There wasn't a grocery store except Stefanik's, so we bought our groceries at Stefanik's and came here to Tony's Hardware for gas or what you need. On the rare occasions we bought alcohol, it wasn't quite in our budget in those days, but we would go to Mary Linux. So the old timers were part of the community. And that began to change. Also, when we moved here, you moved here at the changeable time because AMAX, the battle to this little town facing off against this huge corporation, that battle had been successfully delayed all steps of the mining proposal. And then the price of molybdenum went down. So AMAX stepped back from its push, and the threat, at least temporarily, was gone. And there was huge celebration. There was also burnout and letdown, and a number of people who had been really involved with that left soon after that. And there's a symbolic change to me. W. Mitchell was the mayor when we moved here, one of the dynamic activists in that battle against AMAX. The election after we moved here, Tom Cox was elected mayor. Tom was a great guy, but he was in real estate and then banking. Very, very different. What had happened, we'd been in this sort of circle the wagons mode, protect and defend. And then in the aftermath of that, it was sort of like, oh, shoot, now we have to make a living. And there was a change toward, okay, now we need to make a living. The ski area kind of took off. There were a lot of changes. The old timers, some moved away, some died. And we kind of gained a little bit of an economic momentum during that time.
In the Crested Butte Magazine, I reread both of them before I got here the last couple of days. It was wonderful to be able to do that again. You mentioned that one of the purposes of the Crested Butte Magazine is to remind us who we are at our best. Comment on that.
Things are always changing, and I really admire the people who have this calling to address what's wrong, what's changing, what do we need to fight and get out and change, defend. That is not my calling. My calling is to call out what is good, especially when things are changing hard and fast, and we need to remember what our strengths are. This town has always done things differently, from painting the buses. I mean, what other town has artists paint their buses? There's so many things that we do, and we need to put the light on those things that we do, and remember who we are so we live up to our own standards. I've edited the magazine for 37 years, written for 41 years. And to me, that is something the newspaper can talk about. Okay, what do we need to change? And the magazine can do that some, but really the amazing parts of this community and the standards we want to set for ourselves that we have lived. Yeah, that's part of its role.
You had a chance to meet a lot of the old timers before they passed away. You talk about Tony Stefanik, Ronnie Ruggiero, of course, Tony Mihalich, and you said, secretly, I think I wanted to be an old timer. What the hell are you talking about?
Well, like I mentioned, I had this romanticized idea of being connected to the land, but my granddad's peanut farm was those little towns near Stephenville that you were talking about before. Oliver Springs, De Leon, they felt so dead to me, but I wanted to be connected. And when I moved up here, I thought I moved up here to be a mountain hippie. But the old timers, I was fascinated by their rootedness. And the more I got to know them, like Durs said last week, they lived rich lives without having financial riches. They were resourceful. They were open-minded. And so, they weren't all alike. Some were grumpy and some were shy but they were all very good people. They didn't necessarily like each other, but they belonged to each other. And that was amazing to me. Yet, and here I am, this pampered city girl moving up here. And I wanted to be of hardy mountain stock, like the old timers were. And I wanted a sense of belonging to a place, to a people, to a land. So I wanted to grow up and have what they showed me.
The title of your book, The End of the Road, I think is a great title. And you mentioned there are 4 wilderness areas that bound the Gunnison country: Maroon Bells, Collegiate Peaks, West Elk, Snowmass. And there's only one way out, in and out of here in the winter. Tell me how you believe, as an outsider coming in back then, what kind of an impact did that have on you, and what kind of an impact has that had on Crested Butte? Why are we different?
Well, you're not going to just drop by here on your way somewhere else. You're going to have to work to get here. Whether you move here or you come here on vacation, it takes a choice to get here. And so maybe that raises our stakes a little bit, that it's not, you don't just sort of drop by, and it's a choice. And I think that makes a big difference.
A lot of people say that the children of Crested Butte who go to the community school and who grow up around here grow up outside the box.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think literal and figuratively. My son, our little box of a house, he wasn't in it very much. He was outside the box because he lived outside. We didn't have a lot of prepackaged entertainment. There wasn't a Chuck E. Cheese, next to Stefanik's on Elk Avenue. There wasn't a mall in Almont. But there were mud puddles and snow piles and sticks and trees. The kids made their entertainment. So they were outside the box in that they were creating their own possibilities and their own. There weren't instructions on their playgrounds. And I think because of that, Chris learned where his boundaries were. I would have really made his boundaries much, much tighter than they actually had to be. He learned responsibility and consequences. You don't gather much firewood, you don't get a very big fire. And teamwork. If you go camping and somebody has the the tent, and somebody else has the rain fly, you need each other. So Mother Nature was a very good, she kind of took the pressure of parenting off of me.
The Crested Butte Community School is highly ranked, probably in the top 90% percentile or more in Colorado and the nation. I remember President Gerald Ford coming to Mountaineer Bowl after he had been president and honoring Wayne Aspinall. And he said that they say that education is expensive, but ignorance is a lot more expensive. I want you to comment on what makes the Crested Butte Community School as great a school as it is.
Well, it's been a little while since I've had a kid in the school, but I think it is still true. The teachers know, the teachers and the students know each other as people. They care. The teachers invest a lot in that school. It's education is very valued in our community, the parents, the community itself. I think there's a culture of love of learning. And also I think the teachers, it takes a little bit more effort to teach how to think, not just here's information. Our teachers go to that extra effort. And there's a lot of efforts it's a small school, but there are many efforts to provide enrichment for the students. I mean, the film club, the STEM students helping to design and build housing. There's a big interplay, the community and the school. When our son left the school here and went to the University of Denver, I think it was culture shock, but he was very well prepared to be a thinker, and not all the students were.
The great English historian Arnold Toynbee once said that geography is a great lever of history. We are as we are because of the mountains and the rivers and the elevation and the snow and the weather. I can't think of a place that Toynbee would rather have been when he said that than Crested Butte. Comment on that. What are we like because of the elements and geography?
Well, I'll talk about my own experience. When I was growing up, I read. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't a sporty kid, but I was outdoors a lot. When I moved here, life itself was very physical. I mean, we were out collecting the firewood and then chopping it, sawing it, splitting it. Every time you have to, you want to heat your house, you split more firewood. Life was physical. And then what we did was physical. I learned to telemark and to mountain bike. And so the first thing that happened was I got stronger and I got more confident and I actually inhabited my body. And then inadvertently, I learned to be dependent on big nature. There's nature, there's parks, there's a big nature. And that became so important to me. It started out as a playground, but it became a spiritual and psychological resource, And now when I'm inside too long, I get cranky. My thinking gets small and I just get cranky. I need to let my mind off its leash and I need to maybe sweat a little bit and breathe. And I need the expansiveness of this big nature. So I would say most of us who live here, we are more physical. We inhabit our bodies more than people in this city. And we care about and draw from big nature. And that makes it precious to us so that we want to protect it.
The women of Crested Butte and mountain communities do things that would be shocking to my neck of the woods in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I grew up on a Belgian farming community. My dad was a hard worker, but he couldn't touch my mother. These women in Crested Butte, what makes them so tremendous?
And one thing I have learned here is friendship with the way the women support each other in this community and encourage each other to go forth into the mountains. I hike with a group of women, and Jackie's 75, and we're out there. We thought we were hiking to Hazley Basin. We kind of overshot a little bit, but 9 miles in, and I'm like, this is a 75-year-old woman. She this is impressive. I love that.
I've got a good friend named Martha Walton, who's about mid-80s, and Martha walks when they had the Crested Butte Gothic to Crested Butte race. She walked it no problem, talking to friends on the way. Didn't seem, but I mean, what they do in skiing and mountain biking and mountain climbing, I mean, it just it's unbelievable. I mean, it's a different way of life out here, and I'm very impressed. The next question is, you've been involved with writing, and we've got great people in the arts and music, and sometimes that is hard to quantify, the value of the social sciences. Mm-hmm. And we were talking a little earlier, and I mentioned Immanuel Kant of Austria, who said there are affairs of the heart that are greater than affairs of the mind. I want you to tell me what the value is of art and music and drama and theater and all the great things that people of Crested Butte have been able to do.
Well, I remember Michael and I used to talk about a perfect day. A perfect day would be go out for a really long bike ride or ski, and then come back and go to a concert or play that would make you think or laugh or maybe flinch a little bit, or it would jolt you out of your easy assumptions. That was a good day where you exercise your body and then you exercise the other part, the inner parts of you. I think that is part of what makes Crested Butte so different from what felt like this sort of staid little towns where some of my relatives live. And that shared experience of going, when you're in the audience and there's a performance and you're all moved, it's connecting. And it keeps us from being this provincial place, and it keeps us stirred up, inspired, provoked. We can't just settle into old, easy assumptions and become mental couch potatoes.
Crested Butte is about as cosmopolitan as you could be. Next question is, when I was coaching, if I could have played the March from Aida to my athletes, we'd have never lost at the start of a race. Mm-hmm. It's inspiring. One of my favorite singers, even though she was a derelict and died early, was Janis Joplin. And in Me and Bobby McGee, she said, "Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose." I want you to comment on that.
I don't really know what she meant or the writer meant, but to me, that calls up days when we first moved to Crested Butte. Very few of us were like climbing a ladder or on some career track. It was a time where everything was open to explore. And there was this standing invitation to do whatever the heck you wanted. Be in a mountain theater play, even if you'd never done it before. Take up ceramics or painting. Start a newspaper. It was just a time, because we weren't attached to some sort of rigid path. We had ultimate freedom. Try on anything. See what you think.
One of the things I used to tell my athletes is, and I wasn't the guy that came up with it, anybody who fears failure will never be a success. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Because I'm sure that there weren't great actors and actresses that went into the first Millardi Theater or the theater groups, but they learned on the fly a little bit. So that was
some really excellent people, though. It was astounding. Yeah.
We're going to get a little controversial here, but not too much. I asked Sibley the same question. Gunnison and Crested Butte have been rivals forever. Still are. As an outsider, I can understand that. I've never figured out the advantages of it. Tell me a little bit about that rivalry today, what you see in that rivalry today. What does Gunnison stand for? What does Crested Butte stand for?
It's funny when you ask that of George and of Sandy. To me, I don't see that rivalry so much anymore. It did used to be. There was kind of a line. It's to me really fluid. Yeah, politics a little different, the socioeconomics a little different, but there's so many people that I know that used to live here that live in Gunnison now. There's such a cross pollination, in the arts. The Gunnison is now becoming a creative district, like Crested Butte. Perhaps there's more of it coming from Gunnison up this way, like all these rich people raising the cost of living. I don't feel it.
Okay, that's good. In the last, certainly last decade, but really in the last 30 or 40 years, Crested Butte has gotten a lot wealthier than it had ever been. Today, we hear about Mark Walder, and we hear about Jeff Hermanson, and we hear about Pike, and we hear about the individual putting in North Village. What kind of an impact has that had on Crested Butte, and is that good, bad, or indifferent?
Well, of course, there's the practical effect. It upsets the economic equilibrium. So real estate prices go up, 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 up. How are our critical community workers gonna be able to live here, to buy a home or to rent? It is sort of an interesting thing, though. Like when you apply that to individuals, like I find myself kind of going, money is just a circumstance. Having money doesn't make you a good person or a bad person. That's an independent question. My question for people who are coming here as a resident, as a second homeowner, as a tourist, is, are you coming here to consume or to connect? And my question for us would be, who's going to want to connect with us if we greet them as though they are an enemy? And I think connection, maybe this sounds naive, connection can sometimes work better than confrontation. I was thinking about Joel Benish. I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, this is from the issue of the magazine that's about to come out next week. He was connected. He worked with a lot of nonprofits here. He went to build a big house up on the hill. He built into his house an outdoor amphitheater that holds 300 people. That is, it's only for the nonprofits to use for their fundraisers. Had he not been welcome to become part of these boards, he probably still would have built a big house, but he wouldn't have had that connection and built something that was useful.
Is there any solution in your mind to people who are not wealthy, who have to do the day-to-day work, being able to live in Crested Butte?
Well, there are a lot of really good minds working on the housing issues. This is also taken from the issue of the Crested Butte Magazine that's about to come out on creative housing solutions. There's the big affordable housing projects. Those are slow, but they'll really, really help. There's the small affordable housing. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. The town is working with some property owners to voluntarily put deed restrictions on their homes. Jane and Robin sold their house for significantly below value to make sure that it stayed as local housing, not going into short-term rental or sitting there empty. There's really interesting stuff happening. So there's that. Money comes in, and I know parents say at the school, all of a sudden you have fancy birthday parties and brand clothing, and I'm sorry about that. We did it too. We moved here. The old timers lived super, super simply. And even though we thought we were living simply, we had Michael's Volkswagen bus that really wouldn't start unless you put the screwdriver underneath across those two things. But we had a car. We had a car for a little while until it died. But that was kind of we were the fancy people. We were the ones that were skewing it. So I'm sorry, but we did it too.
The old timers that came here were immigrants, many of them from Southeastern Europe. They put up with mine explosions, economic hardship, not knowing the language. They went through a lot of adversity.
Mhm.
Did the mid-timers, of which you are a part of, go through that adversity? And do you think that there were some advantages for the old timers having to go through that?
Yeah, because they were tough and they were resourceful and they learned sort of like Chris not having a Chuck E. Cheese. You invent your richness, and that's another one of those that the continuum. We I'm sure we looked spoiled to them. Like they did what they had to do to put food on the table. And sometimes that meant, hunting and fishing and mushroom hunting. And they did what it took. We like to think that, oh yeah, we had it really rough. We had to chop kindling if we wanted to heat our house. But we had paychecks. And after a few years, we could buy a new car to replace the Volkswagen van that blew up and became a storage unit in Mark O'Neill's yard. But and now it is true. You see people, they come here, the young people, they have a lot of money, they buy a house, they hire people to shovel the snow or to clean or whatever. It's kind of easy to think, oh, they don't have as much stake in the community because they haven't sacrificed as much as we have. But I'm again, it's continuing. I'm sure we look like spoiled brats.
You're a member of this group, so I'm going to ask you, what do you think the legacy is of the mid-timers?
Well, the mid-timers, I think what we did is we bridged from the old timers. We whether we kind of meant it or not, I think we added and I don't know that I can say we, but there was this creativity that came. The old timers anchored this place because they were resourceful and they were open-minded and they cared about each other. And I think they cared about this place, and we wanted to carry that forward. But there was also like George starting Flashing and Sandy and her photos, and a lot of the creativity, the sparkle, some of the things that have added that a little bit of energy and pizzazz came from the mid-timers.
Crested Butte is now a ski town and a tourist town. How has that changed the town?
I have to say, I'd so much rather be a tourist town than a mining town the way the mining industry is now. And if you think about it, people come here. Well, I have a perspective because we have owned the old town. My family has owned the Old Town Inn for 21 years. The world beats people up. People arrive and their bladders are full and they've had too much truck stop coffee, but they are beat up by life. They are tired and they're hassled and they're stressed. And over 2 or 3 days, and they're outside and they're riding their bikes or they're out in nature, or just by the end of the time, when they check out, they are nicer people. The families are getting along better. So I'm like, okay, people come here and we give them physical, psychological, spiritual refreshment, and they give us their money. That's not too bad. Now, what it does require is we need to remember who we are so we can keep doing that. And we need to make sure the magic stays magical. We need to take care of nature. There are a lot of people out there. They need to go to the bathroom. Poop kiss, education, designated campsites. Leave some of the trails off the trail maps. And we also need to take care of ourselves as a community. We need Vinatoc. We need Flushing. We need to have a sense of who we are so that we have the structural integrity to host other people without losing our identity.
If you had never come to Crested Butte, where would Sandy Fales be right now in 2023?
I would probably think I was old, and here I don't.
Where would you live?
I don't know. Here's what I hope. I used to think I would be a professor because I really loved academia until I figured out that the real world is a lot more interesting than the books talking about the real world. I hope I would be a writer somewhere following my curiosity. I hope I would have found some place where big nature dominated. But I don't really know. I don't know. Crested Butte changed me a lot. Without that impact, I don't know where I would be.
Now, we've talked about a lot of facets of Crested Butte. So one of the final questions, but not the final one yet, is what do you think the soul of Crested Butte is? I want you to put that in the form of a paragraph for me.
I actually kind of love that question. And I think it goes back to we've always done things differently, from the having artists paint the buses, introducing extreme skiing when the ski industry was kind of getting more and more staid and scared of lawsuits. And I think we are fun and bold. I think we are connected to each other, connected to this land. When there's a gathering, a memorial service, a wedding, something at the center, and I look around and I look at all the people, and I think there is a web of community here. I'm an introvert. I stay home a lot, but I feel it. I'm woven into it. And I think that's part of the legacy of the old timers too. You have to like each other, but we do belong to each other. And we have a responsibility to each other and to the land. And in the meantime, let's be fun. Let's do things differently. Let's be creative. Let's be bold. And let's take care.
Some people say that Crested Butte is a complex town. And I'll give you an example. If you brought somebody in to be the superintendent of schools or the head of Mount Crested Butte, and they come from out of town, they don't know anything about Crested Butte, their chances of succeeding are probably, in my mind, limited, because this is a very educated town, and politically and in other ways, it's complex. Do you agree?
Yeah, but I wonder if every place is complex, because we are human beings and we're flawed, but we're trying to figure it out. I think maybe it feels more complex here because we're trying to balance things that could seem, at least to do battle a little bit. We're trying to share our place and we're trying to protect our place. And we are trying to be open and welcoming while we're dealing with people from very different backgrounds. And what makes it feel complex maybe is that we care so much. We have high stakes. We feel like it's our job to take care of a very special place, and we really care. That makes it.
Does it make sense? Are you an optimist in terms of the future of Crested Butte?
I'm a ridiculous optimist. It's not that I think that the results will be, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure stuff out. Not that it's going to be perfect. We're going to lose some stuff. We just have to keep remembering who we are. Who are we? We're pretty darn cool. We're cool. Aren't we cool? We are creative. We do think. We have so much going for us. Yes, money there are these challenges. There's so many challenges. And no, I don't think it will stay the same that it's always been. But I think in 15 years, it'll be very, very different. We will have lost some things and we'll go like, and it'll be a very cool place because it will continue to draw people here who are very cool people.
Someone said one time, the only thing that never changes is change.
Mhm.
So however you think about it, it's going to happen. Final question, and a big one. What should I have asked Sandy Fales that I didn't ask?
Oh, gosh. Please. No, I think you covered it all. Okay. We're good. No, I think we're good.
Okay, I think we're good. We're about out of time here, so I'm going to turn it over to Belinda, and we'll take some questions from the audience or people on Zoom. And we had a lot of people on Zoom today, so thanks for being on Zoom.
So make sure you open the chat box and type in your question, or if you have a comment for Sandy or for Dwayne. Is there anybody here in the audience who'd like to ask a question first? All right, here we go.
So, the Crested Butte Magazine, does it have a specific, focused purpose of something in addition to just kind of general interest stories and stuff? Is there something that the magazine sort of really is passionate about, and some of all these things that we're talking about and expressing and supporting those kinds of thoughts and initiatives?
The Crested Butte Magazine is kind of a way. I think what guides it puts itself together at this point. Sometimes I'm like, wow, how did that happen? It puts itself together from conversations at the post office or in the produce aisle of the grocery store, or it's like, the question is, what is happening here that is just so excellent, that is creative, that is surprising, that is interesting, that says something about who we are? Who needs the light shined on them because they are a really interesting person? In this upcoming issue, there's a feature on Eric. The Arctic explorer who, there you go. Thank you. Eric Larson. Great guy. Polar explorer, has all these world records, has traveled to all the poles 6 times, has been on Everest. And now he's dealing with stage 4 cancer, and great guy. And it's sort of like, what do we want to think about? What's interesting? Who are the great people here? What cool stuff is happening?
And you mentioned you want to remind people to see them at their best through the magazine, which is really, really good.
Sandy, when is the magazine coming out?
Next week. Actually, I was hoping to pick up an advanced copy to bring here tonight. Not yet. So not quite here, but it's rolling off the press today. And so we'll probably get the magazines very soon.
Yes, sir. Question in the back.
Talked a little bit about the feeling that you wanted to have roots here and maybe be like the old timers and experience that kind of rootedness. I'm sure after 40 some years that you feel differently about your roots as they relate to Crested Butte. And I'd like to ask you about that. But in turn, you've talked about the cyclical nature of being here and how in this day and age, like your son, for example, I'm not sure if this is true for him, but as an example, he has roots here, but may not be able to come back here as a college graduate. So is Crested Butte sort of doomed to this cycle of rootlessness. How do you feel about that, or can you comment on that perspective?
Our son was lucky. Well, first of all, he couldn't wait to get out of here. He graduated from high school, out of here. And then it didn't take him that long to start kind of showing back up with his college buddies. And they were like, dude, you got to grow up. and eventually he traveled a great deal. He would work at the hotel, save money and then go travel. And he did move back. But the reason he could move back is that in the beginning, he could live with us and he could work at our hotel. A lot of kids in his class, kids who are now 36, more than half of the kids in his graduating class have moved back here. That is astounding to me. How can they do it? How can they make it work? Now, maybe they move in with their parents when they first live here. Maybe there's a family business. I am sorry, we couldn't have moved to the town as it is now. And that is a shame. But it is interesting that a lot of these young people are finding ways to move back here.
I know some people who are bartenders who have master's degrees. One's an engineering graduate, and they're kind of just playing it on the fly. They're young; they'll figure it out. And I think that the category is you got to work about 2 or 3 jobs, but they're having fun doing it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a kid getting out of high school. I think we ought to have in the United States, just like New Zealand. You get out of high school, you take 1 year and you're going to travel. And you're going to learn a lot. Yes, sir.
So has affordable housing always been an issue? Or when did it become an issue?
Want to repeat that question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is affordable housing an issue? It's an issue now, but has it always been an issue, or when did it become an issue?
It's certainly with the Airbnb situation became much more of an issue. When we lived here, the town had most of these buildings, most of the homes had people our age living in them when we were in our 20s. It was the old timers or the young ski bums. There weren't people our parents' age. There was nobody in between. But many of those homes now are either Airbnb situations or they're second homes. And people then have moved down valley. And now even down valley is expensive. So it's much more of an issue. The availability. For a while, it's been hard. You would have to work several jobs, or you have to work hard to be able to live here. It's expensive, but you could do it. Now, availability there's just not that much. So it's certainly more, the availability is much more of an issue than it was even 10 years ago.
Right, we have a few comments and questions on Zoom. Pete Dunda, we have very much enjoyed a very interesting and sometimes provocative interview with Sandy. Thank you very much. And remember, Veterans Day on Saturday, November 11th. And I do want to do a quick shout out to thank all the veterans for their bravely fighting for our freedom. So thank you, Pete, and thank you, veterans who are watching. We have David who has chimed in. Thank you for the Crested Butte Magazine. It is the first thing that our family looks for when we come to town each season. And it is a very valuable resource for all, those who live here as well as those who visit. George Sibley, you own a motel here. Has the nature of your visitors changed over the years?
Well, it has, but that is a little bit to do with the hotel itself has changed. It was a little run down when we bought it. The owners were a little older, had a health issue, lived in Gunnison. They couldn't give it the attention it deserved. But really, it's kind of remarkable. The people who work for the hotel are always saying, why are people so nice here? We get really, really nice guests. And I would say maybe there's a certain level of affluence that we've seen, but it really would you have a perspective on that? I feel like what happens, people have a stake in this community. They come here to visit and we treat them well and we take care of people and people relax and they're just super nice. We have super nice people stay with us.
And do you have a lot of return customers?
We have a lot of people. There are people that there's one couple, they stay with us for 2 weeks every year. There's a lot of people who come back and back and back and back. Yeah.
Any other question here in the audience?
Sandy, I want to thank you very much
Yeah,
for being the guest tonight. And I want to remind everybody that next week is going to be Mark Riemann, the man who runs the newspaper, and that we may get a little more provocative with Mark than we've been so far, because there are a lot of issues available. So thanks, everybody, for being on Zoom, and thanks for all of you for coming here at Tony's.
We appreciate you, Daylene and Sandy. Sandy's book, Where the Road Ends, is for sale here at the museum gift store. It would make a fabulous present for someone this holiday season. We also appreciate you for watching and our continued support towards the museum. We hope you consider joining us by attending our future events. A few upcoming events include a holiday raffle that will start this December, Santa, December 16th here at the museum. We have a polka party with Mr. Pete Dunda on December 28th, and a virtual series will begin with Dwayne Vandenbush starting in January. All this information is available on our webpage, and we will make sure we keep it up to date. That's CrestedButteMuseum.com, or stop in at the museum gift store and ask a cashier or a member of staff. Once again, thank you to the veterans, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Hey, Mike.